My son sat there grinning like he had just won the lottery while the lawyer read my ex-wife's will. He looked at me with pure pity, the kind you reserve for a stray dog you are about to kick out into the rain. "You are getting zero, Dad," he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not a single dime. Go back to your rental." He was right about the rental. He was right that on paper I was just the broke ex-husband. But he was wrong about who was actually in charge. Because when the lawyer read the next sentence, my son's smile vanished faster than his credit score. "My name is Thomas Blackwood. I am 68 years old. And this is the story of how I taught my ungrateful son that the man who builds the bridge is the only one who knows how to blow it up." If you have ever been underestimated by your own family, like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain at the cemetery was cold, but not as cold as the look my son Brandon gave me when I tried to approach the casket. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "The front row is for family." "Thomas," he said. He did not call me Dad. He hadn't called me Dad in 5 years. Not since he decided that a retired engineer living in a small apartment wasn't good enough for his image as a rising marketing executive. He pointed a gloved hand toward the back of the crowd, past the business partners, past the distant cousins, past the people who only knew Catherine for her money. "You can stand back there by the gate," Brandon said. "Try not to embarrass us. Tiffany is live streaming this for her followers." I looked at Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She was standing by the grave holding a black lace umbrella in one hand and her phone in the other. She was posing. She was actually posing next to my ex-wife's open grave, checking her angles, making sure her waterproof mascara was perfectly tragic. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded and walked to the back. I stood under an oak tree watching them bury the woman I had loved for 40 years. Catherine and I had divorced 10 years ago, but it wasn't because we stopped loving each other. It was business. It was a strategic move to protect her assets from a lawsuit that threatened to sink her empire. We stayed divorced on paper because it was safer. We lived apart because it kept up the appearance. But every Sunday she came to my small apartment for coffee. Every major decision she made, she ran by me first. Brandon didn't know that. He only saw the surface. He only saw a mother who was a real estate tycoon worth millions and a father who drove a 10-year-old truck. The service ended. As the crowd began to disperse, Tiffany walked over to me. Her heels sank into the wet grass. She didn't look sad. She looked impatient. She pulled a cream-colored envelope from her designer purse and shoved it into my chest. "This is for you, Tom," she said. I took it. It felt heavy. I thought maybe it was a letter from Catherine, a final goodbye she had entrusted to them. I opened it right there in the rain. It wasn't a letter. It was a legal notice. A notice to quit. An eviction notice. I read the words. "You are hereby required to vacate the premises located at 42 Oak Street within 72 hours. I looked up. Brandon was standing next to his wife, a smirk playing on his lips. "The apartment belongs to the estate now, Dad," Brandon said. "And as the sole heir, I have decided to liquidate the asset. You have 3 days. 3 days. I looked at the house keys in my pocket. Catherine had bought that small apartment building years ago under a shell company. She let me live there rent-free. It was our meeting place. "You are evicting me at a funeral?" I asked. My voice was calm. It surprised even me. "We are just ripping off the Band-Aid," Tiffany chimed in. "Besides, that apartment is in a prime location. We can flip it for at least 500 grand. You understand business, don't you, Tom?" "Oh, wait. No, you don't. That is why you are the poor one." She laughed. A short, cruel sound. Brandon placed a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't affectionate. It was heavy. "Don't make this hard, Dad. Mom is gone." Her charity died with her. You have 3 days to get your junk out. If you are not gone by Friday, I will call the sheriff. And Dad, don't bother coming to the reading of the will tomorrow. It will just be embarrassing for you. He patted my shoulder twice, then turned around. Come on, babe, he said to Tiffany. We have a dinner reservation. I watched them walk away. They walked with the swagger of people who thought they owned the world. They got into Brandon's leased Porsche and drove off, splashing mud onto my shoes. I stood there alone in the cemetery. I looked at the eviction notice again. Then I looked at Catherine's headstone. I took my phone out of my pocket. It was an old model, cracked screen, exactly the kind of phone a poor old man would have. I dialed a number from memory. Mr. Prescott, I said. The voice on the other end was sharp and immediate. Thomas. I assume they made their move. They did, I replied. They served me an eviction notice at the graveside. There was a silence on the line. Then a low, cold chuckle. Classic, Brandon Prescott said. Are we green for tomorrow? We are green, I said. Initiate phase 1. And Prescott, make sure the room is cold. I want them uncomfortable. I hung up. I walked out of the cemetery. I didn't go back to my apartment to pack. I went to a diner, ordered a black coffee, and sat there for 3 hours just thinking. I wasn't thinking about where I would live. I was thinking about the list of numbers I had memorized. $28 million. That was the total value of Catherine's estate. But there were other numbers Brandon didn't know about. $2.4 million. That was Brandon's gambling debt across 3 different casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City. $450,000. That was the credit card debt Tiffany had racked up buying purses and shoes to maintain her online image. And $100. That was the IQ limit they both failed to reach. They thought they were predators. They didn't realize they were just termites chewing on a foundation that was about to collapse on top of them. The next morning, I arrived at the law offices of Prescott & Associates. The building was glass and steel towering over the city. I wore my best suit. It was 15 years old, a little tight around the shoulders, slightly frayed at the cuffs. I wanted to look exactly like the desperate, grieving ex-husband they expected. The receptionist didn't want to let me in. Name, she asked without looking up. Thomas Blackwood. She checked her list. I don't see you on the VIP list for the Blackwood estate reading. I am not a VIP, I said. I am the father. She sighed and picked up the phone. A moment later, Mr. Prescott himself came out. Prescott was a shark in a 3-piece suit. He had been Catherine's attorney for 30 years. He knew where every body was buried because he had helped us dig the holes. Let him in, Prescott said. I walked into the conference room. It was massive. A long mahogany table that could seat 20 people. At the far end, Brandon and Tiffany were already seated. They looked like they were at a party. Brandon had a glass of scotch in his hand. It was 10 a.m. Tiffany was scrolling on her phone, her legs kicked up on the chair next to her. When I walked in, Brandon groaned. I told you not to come, Dad, he said. Jesus. Do you have no dignity? You are like a raccoon digging through the trash. I pulled out a metal folding chair from the corner and sat near the door, far away from them. I just want to hear what she wanted, I said quietly. She wanted you gone, Tiffany snapped. That is why she divorced you. God, this is pathetic. Can we hurry this up? We have a realtor coming to look at the mansion at noon. Mr. Prescott sat at the head of the table. He placed a thick leather binder in front of him. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at Brandon. He looked at Tiffany. Then he looked at me. His face was stone. We are here to read the last will and testament of Catherine Blackwood Prescott began. He skipped the pleasantries. He went straight to the assets. The estate consists of the primary residence at 55 Highland Drive, valued at $4.5 million. The vacation property in Aspen, valued at $3.2 million. the vintage car collection appraised at $1.8 million, and liquid assets, stocks, and bonds totaling approximately $18.5 million. Total estate value is estimated at $28 million. Brandon let out a whistle. He clinked his glass against Tiffany's water bottle. 28 big ones, baby, he whispered. We are buying the yacht. Tiffany's eyes were wide. She was practically vibrating. I could see her mentally spending the money. She was probably already picking out the interior design for a private jet. Prescott cleared his throat. To my ex-husband, Thomas Blackwood, I leave nothing. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. Boom. Did you hear that, old man? Nothing, zero, it is in writing. Tiffany laughed. It was a high, shrill sound. You wasted the cab fare to get here, Tom. You should have listened. I sat still. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked down at the floor, letting my shoulders slump. Prescott waited for them to finish celebrating. He turned a page. The sound of the paper turning was loud in the quiet room. However, Prescott read, his voice raising slightly. Brandon froze. The glass of scotch stopped halfway to his mouth. However, Brandon asked. However, Prescott continued. All assets, including all properties, vehicles, and cash accounts, shall be immediately transferred into the Catherine Blackwood Protective Trust. Trust. Brandon stood up. What trust? We didn't discuss a trust. I am the executor. I am the son. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood, Prescott said. His voice was like a whip. Brandon sat slowly. The trust, Prescott read, has been established to ensure the longevity of the estate. The beneficiary of the trust is Brandon Blackwood. Brandon relaxed. He slumped back in his chair. Okay. You scared me for a second. So it is in a trust. Whatever. Just sign the check over to me. How do I access it? You don't, Prescott said. Excuse me. You do not access the trust, Mr. Blackwood. The trust is a discretionary entity. That means the assets are controlled by a trustee. The beneficiary, that is you, has no direct access to the capital. You cannot sell the properties. You cannot withdraw the cash. You cannot leverage the assets for loans. You receive what the trustee decides to give you. Brandon's face turned red. Who is the trustee? He demanded. Is it you, Prescott? Because if it is you, you are fired. I will hire my own lawyers. We will break this thing in a week. It is not me, Prescott said. Then who? Tiffany shrieked. Who controls our money? Prescott closed the binder. He took off his glasses. He pointed a finger toward the back of the room, toward the folding chair, toward me. The sole trustee, with absolute and final authority over every single penny, is Thomas Blackwood. The silence in the room was absolute. It felt like all the air had been sucked out. Brandon turned his head slowly. He looked at me. He looked like he was trying to solve a physics equation in a foreign language. Him, Brandon whispered. My dad. The guy who clips coupons for cat food. That is correct, Prescott said. Your father controls the house you are living in. He controls the cars you drive. He controls the bank accounts. If you want a stick of gum, Mr. Blackwood, you have to ask your father for permission to buy it. No, Tiffany screamed. She jumped up. This is a joke. This is a sick joke. He is a loser. He is a broke nobody. Catherine hated him. Apparently not, I said. I stood up. I pushed the folding chair aside. I didn't slouch anymore. I stood up to my full height. I unbuttoned my frayed suit jacket and buttoned it again properly. I walked to the table. Brandon watched me come. He looked terrified. Dad, he said. Dad, look, we were just joking earlier. You know that, right? The eviction thing. That was just stress. Grief. We deal with grief differently. I ignored him. I walked past him. I walked to the head of the table. Prescott stood up and offered me his chair. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. I sat down in the leather chair. It was comfortable. It fit perfectly. I opened the binder. I didn't look at the will. I looked at the second tab. The tab marked liabilities. I put on my reading glasses. Not the cheap drugstore ones I wore around them. My prescription glasses. "Let's see what we have here," I said. I pulled out a document. "Brandon," I said. "It says here you owe $2 million to the Emerald Casino in Las Vegas, and another $800,000 to a private lending group in Chicago. A group that is known for breaking kneecaps, not charging interest." Brandon went pale. How do you have that?" I pulled out another sheet. "And Tiffany," I said. 5 credit cards maxed out. A second mortgage on your parents' house that you forged their signature for." "That is a felony, dear." Tiffany stopped screaming. She collapsed into her chair. "Here is the situation," I said. My voice was hard. It was the voice I used when I managed construction crews on skyscrapers. It was the voice of a man who built foundations that held up millions of tons of steel. "As trustee, I have a fiduciary duty to protect the assets of the trust. Paying off gambling debts and shopping sprees for luxury handbags does not fall under prudent investment." "Dad, please," Brandon stammered. "Those guys in Chicago. If I don't pay them by the first of the month, they said they would hurt me. You have to release the funds. It is $28 million. "It is a drop in the bucket," denied, I said. "What request?" denied, I said. "I am not releasing a single cent of Catherine's money to pay for your mistakes." "You can't do that," Brandon yelled. He slammed his fists on the table. "It is my money. It is my inheritance. It is my decision," I corrected him. Brandon's face twisted. It was ugly. It was the face of a spoiled child who had never been told no. He lunged. He jumped over the table, reaching for my throat. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. Before he could touch me, 2 large men in black suits stepped out from the side office. I had hired them that morning. One of them grabbed Brandon by the back of his expensive suit jacket and slammed him back into his chair. "Sit down," the guard growled. Brandon gasped for air. He looked at the guard, then at me. "You brought security to a will reading I learned from the best," I said. "You evicted me at a funeral. I figured I should be prepared." Tiffany was crying now. Not the pretty crying she did at the grave. Ugly crying. Snot and mascara running down her face. "Tom, please," she wailed. "We are family. You can't leave us like this. We will lose everything. They will take the cars. They will evict us from our condo." I leaned forward. "Speaking of evictions," I said. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was the eviction notice they had given me yesterday. "I have decided to accept your terms. I will vacate my apartment." "Good," Brandon said, rubbing his neck. "Good. At least you are being reasonable." However, I continued, since the mansion on Highland Drive is now trust property, and I am the trustee, I have decided to conduct a thorough audit of the premises." "What does that mean?" Tiffany asked. "It means," I said, "that I am changing the locks on the mansion today. You two have been living there for free for 6 months while Catherine was in the hospital. That ends now. You are kicking us out," Brandon screamed. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at the eviction notice again. "I hear there is a nice apartment available on Oak Street," I said. "It needs some work. It has a bit of a damp smell. But it is available in 3 days." I tossed the eviction notice back at him. "Rent is $2,000 a month, payable to the trust. Don't be late." Brandon stared at the paper. His hands were shaking. I stood up. "Meeting adjourned," I said. I walked out of the office. Prescott followed me. "That went well," Prescott said as we got into the elevator. "It is just the beginning," I said. "Brandon isn't going to give up," Prescott warned. He is desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. I know, I said. I am counting on it. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. The sun was shining through the glass. Let's go to the bank, Arthur, I said. I want to see my accounts. And then I want to buy a very expensive bottle of whiskey. To celebrate, Prescott asked. No, I said. To pour on the ground for Catherine. She always hated the cheap stuff I drank. For the next 3 days, I watched my son unravel from a distance. I moved into a hotel. Not a luxury one, just a clean place with room service. I needed a base of operations. My phone blew up. 50 calls from Brandon. 20 from Tiffany. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I watched Tiffany's social media. She went live that night. She was crying holding a glass of wine. My husband's father is a monster, she told her followers. He stole our inheritance. He is abusing his power. We are victims of a bitter old man. The comments were pouring in. People were sending her sympathy, sending her money. Poor you. That is awful. Sue him. I watched it and drank my coffee. Go ahead, I whispered to the screen. Dig the hole deeper. The next morning, the first legal attack arrived. I was served with a lawsuit. Brandon was suing for removal of the trustee. He was claiming I was mentally incompetent. He claimed I had dementia, that I was unfit to manage $28 million. I called Prescott. He filed a 205 petition, Prescott said. He has an affidavit from a doctor claiming he examined you and found signs of cognitive decline. I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years, I said. I know, Prescott said. The doctor is Dr. Eris. He is a known hired gun for these types of cases. He will sign anything for $5,000. So what do we do, I asked. We fight it, Prescott said. But it will freeze the assets. The judge will put a temporary hold on the trust until the competency hearing. That could take months. Months, I repeated. Brandon didn't have months. The loan sharks in Chicago weren't going to wait for a court date. This was a stall tactic. He was trying to force a settlement. Tell the judge I will submit to an independent evaluation, I said. Immediately. Today. It doesn't work that fast, Tom. The courts are slow. Then we make them fast, I said. I hung up. I needed to provoke him. I needed him to make a mistake bigger than a fake lawsuit. I went to the mansion. I knew they hadn't left yet. I knew they were squatting. I pulled up to the gate in a taxi. The gate was locked. I used my key. The electronic code Catherine had given me 10 years ago. It still worked. The gate swung open. I walked up the long driveway. The mansion was a beast of a house. 12 bedrooms, a pool, a tennis court. It was a monument to excess. Brandon's Porsche was in the driveway. I walked up to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. I stepped into the foyer. It smelled like stale pizza and expensive perfume. Boxes were everywhere. They weren't packing to leave. They were selling things. I saw stickers on the antique vases. Prices. $5,000. $10,000. They were running an estate sale. An illegal estate sale. I walked into the living room. There were strangers in the house. People walking around picking up Catherine's crystal figurines. Brandon was in the corner taking cash from a man in a trench coat. Sold, Brandon said. Give me the cash. What is going on here? I boomed. The room went silent. Brandon spun around. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Dad, he said. What are you doing here? You can't be here. I have a restraining order pending. I looked at the man in the trench coat. He was holding a painting. A landscape Catherine had bought in Paris. Put that down, I told the man. That property belongs to the trust. Purchasing stolen goods is a crime. The man looked at Brandon. You said this was yours. It is mine, Brandon yelled. It is my mother's house. The man put the painting down and backed away. I am not getting involved in this, he said. He walked out. Other buyers started to leave. They sensed the trouble. Get out, Brandon screamed at them. Buy something or get out, he turned to me. His eyes were wild. He hadn't slept. He looked manic. You are ruining everything, he screamed. I need this money. They are going to kill me, Dad. Do you understand? They are going to break my legs. Then maybe you shouldn't have gambled away money you didn't have, I said calmly. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Tiffany hissed. She came down the stairs. She was wearing one of Catherine's fur coats. It was too big for her. She looked ridiculous. You always were jealous, she said. Jealous of Brandon. Jealous of Catherine's success. You were just the engineer, the worker bee. You couldn't handle being around real success. I looked at her. Take off the coat, Tiffany, I said. Make me, she sneered. I didn't have to. Sirens wailed in the distance. I had called the police on the way over. Brandon ran to the window. Cops, you called the cops. You are selling assets that don't belong to you, I said. That is theft. Grand larceny given the value of that painting. Brandon panicked. He looked around the room. He grabbed a vase. A Ming vase. It was worth $20,000. I am going to smash it, he yelled. I will smash everything. If I can't have it, nobody can. He held the vase over his head. Go ahead, I said. Brandon paused. He expected me to beg. Break it, I said. It is insured. The trust will get the full value, and you will add another felony charge to your record. Destruction of property. Go on, son. Make my day. Brandon's hands shook. He lowered the vase. He started to cry. He sank to the floor, hugging the vase like a teddy bear. Why do you hate me? He sobbed. I don't hate you, Brandon, I said. I am trying to save you. Save me. You are destroying me. No, I said. I am stopping you. You have been running on a treadmill of lies for 10 years. You think money is the answer to everything. It isn't. It is just fuel. If your engine is broken, the fuel just makes you burn faster. The police knocked on the door. Open up, police. I walked to the door. I opened it. 2 officers stood there. Mr. Blackwood, one asked. I am Thomas Blackwood, the trustee, I said. These 2 people are trespassing and attempting to sell stolen property. I would like them removed. The officers walked in. They saw Brandon on the floor. They saw the price tags on the furniture. Sir, ma'am, you need to come with us, the officer said. They didn't arrest them, not yet. It was a civil dispute at this point, but they were escorted out. I watched from the porch as they were put into the back of a squad car to be driven off the property. Tiffany was screaming at the officers, telling them she had 1 million followers. Brandon just looked at me through the glass. He looked small. I locked the front door. I was alone in the mansion. It was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the empty halls. I remembered when this house was full of life. When Brandon was a boy running down these stairs. Where did I go wrong? I asked the empty air. I knew the answer. I had given him too much. Catherine and I, we felt guilty for working so hard, so we compensated with gifts, with money. We taught him that the world owed him a living. Now I had to teach him the hardest lesson of all. I went to the library. I sat at Catherine's desk. I opened the top drawer. There was a false bottom. I knew about it because I built the desk for her 20 years ago. I popped the latch. Inside there was a small notebook. Catherine's diary. And a letter. Addressed to me. Tom, the letter read, If you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are reading this, it means Brandon has done exactly what we feared he would do. I tried to help him, Tom. I paid his debts twice. I bailed him out. But he never learns. He only wants more. You were always the strong one, the disciplined one. I need you to be strong one last time. Don't give him the money, not until he is broken, not until he understands what it means to earn $1. Break him, Tom, so we can build him back up. Love, Cat. I wiped a tear from my eye. I wasn't the villain. I was the final gift Catherine had given our son. I was the rock bottom he needed to hit. But the war wasn't over. Brandon was cornered. And a cornered rat doesn't just hide, it bites. My phone rang. It was a blocked number. I answered. Mr. Blackwood, a voice said. It was deep, gravelly, speaking. We represent certain interested parties in Chicago. We understand you are controlling the purse strings for your son now. I gripped the phone. I am, I said. Good. Then you know he owes us $800,000. With interest, let's call it an even million. I don't owe you anything, I said. No, the voice said. You don't. But accidents happen. Old men fall downstairs. Houses catch fire. It would be a shame if something happened to the trustee before he could sign a check. Are you threatening me? I asked. I am explaining the economics of the situation, the voice said. You have 24 hours to transfer the funds, or we will come to collect. And we don't take IOUs. The line went dead. I sat there in the silent library. Brandon had brought the wolves to my door. I looked at the letter from Catherine. Be strong. I picked up the phone and dialed Prescott. We have a problem, I said. What is it? The Chicago debt just became my problem. They threatened me. Call the police, Prescott said. No, I said. Police can't stop these guys. They will just wait. Then what do we do? We pay them, I said. What you just said, I am not giving them Catherine's money, I said. I am going to buy the debt. I don't understand. I am going to use my own savings, I said. I have some money put away, not millions, but enough. I will buy the debt note from them at a discount. Cash. Today. Why would you do that? Prescott asked. Because I said. Once I own the debt, I own Brandon. He won't owe the mob anymore. He will owe me. And I am going to collect in a way the mob never could. How I am going to make him work it off, I said. Minimum wage. For the rest of his life, if necessary. I hung up. It was a risky move. It would drain my personal retirement. If I failed, I would be broke. But it was the only way. I wasn't just fighting for the money anymore. I was fighting for my son's soul. And the battle was just getting started. I stayed in the hotel room with the blackout curtains drawn tight. The world outside was bright and loud, but in here it was silent. I needed the silence. I needed to think. My phone sat on the mahogany desk, vibrating every 3 seconds. It wasn't ringing. It was buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of them. Thousands. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. My name was trending. Thomas Blackwood, the monster of Highland Drive. I clicked on the link that had been sent to me by a dozen different numbers I didn't recognize. It led to a live stream. Tiffany was on screen. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. She was wearing a simple, oversized gray t-shirt. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy. She sat on the floor of her parents' cramped living room, hugging her knees to her chest. She looked vulnerable. She looked broken. She was a professional. Guys, she whispered to the camera. I didn't want to do this. I wanted to handle this privately. But I am scared. I am so scared for my husband. The viewer count was climbing. 20,000 people watching. 30,000. She wiped a tear from her cheek. You know about the will, she continued. You know that Brandon's mom passed away, but you don't know the truth about his father. Thomas, She said my name like it was a curse word. He has always been abusive, she lied. Not physically, but up here. She tapped her temple. He controlled Catherine for years. He made her think she was going crazy, and now he is doing it to us. He kicked us out on the street. He laughed at us while we packed our bags. He is holding the inheritance hostage because he wants to see us suffer. He is a narcissist, a predator. I watched the comments scroll by on the side of the screen. They were moving so fast, they were a blur of hate. Find him. Expose him. Someone should teach this old man a lesson. I sipped my cold coffee. I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, detached assessment. When I was a chief engineer, I built bridges that spanned miles of open water. I learned very quickly that you cannot control the wind. You cannot control the waves. You can only control the integrity of the steel. You build the foundation deep enough that the storm doesn't matter. Tiffany was the storm. She was a Category 5 hurricane of lies and manipulation. She was trying to erode my foundation. She didn't know I was built on bedrock. She held up a piece of paper to the camera. "Look at this," she sobbed. "This is a letter he sent us, threatening us." I squinted at the screen. It was a fake. I had never written a letter. I only spoke through lawyers. She had forged it. He said, "If we don't give him half of Brandon's salary for the rest of his life, he will make sure we never see a dime of the inheritance," she cried. "He is blackmailing his own son." The donation link at the bottom of her video was flashing. Money was pouring in. People were donating $5, $10, $50 to the Poor Victims Fund. I turned off the phone. I didn't throw it against the wall. I didn't scream. I walked to the window and peeked through the gap in the curtains. There were reporters downstairs. I could see the news vans. They had found me. A hotel employee must have sold my location. I was trapped. I was isolated. I had no friends to call. My wife was dead. My son was my enemy. The world thought I was a monster. Most men would have cracked. Most men would have gone downstairs and tried to explain themselves. They would have shouted that it was a lie. But an engineer knows that when the pressure is high, you don't add more pressure. You redistribute the load. I went to the bathroom and shaved. I put on a fresh shirt. I tied my tie with steady hands. I ordered room service. A club sandwich and a pot of tea. When the waiter brought it, he wouldn't look me in the eye. He set the tray down hard on the table. He practically ran out of the room. He had seen the video. I ate the sandwich. I drank the tea. Then I opened my laptop and started a video call with Prescott. His face appeared on the screen. He looked sweaty. He was in his office, but I could see people running around in the background. Thomas Prescott said, "It is a disaster. The firm's phones are ringing off the hook. We are getting death threats. They are calling for my disbarment for representing you." "Calm down, Arthur," I said. "Calm down. Have you seen the internet? They are doxing you. They posted your old address. They are coming for you. We need to issue a statement. We need to settle. Give them something to make this stop." "No," I said. "Thomas, be reasonable. This is a PR nightmare. We are losing the court of public opinion." "I don't care about public opinion," I said. "I care about facts. They are destroying your reputation." "My reputation was built on 40 years of honest work," I said. "It won't be destroyed by a girl with a ring light and a fake crying act." "What do you want to do?" Prescott asked. He sounded desperate. "I want you to prepare a file," I said. "A file. I want the blueprints, Arthur." "What blueprints?" "The blueprints of their destruction." I leaned into the camera. "Tiffany made a mistake," I said. "She got greedy. She forged a letter. That is fraud. She is soliciting donations based on a lie. That is wire fraud. She is using a carriage service to transport goods bought with those donations. That makes it federal." "You want to press charges?" Prescott asked. Not yet, I said. That is too slow. I want to use the nuclear option. Prescott froze. You mean Clause B, I mean Clause B. Thomas, that clause, Catherine put that in there as a failsafe. It was never meant to be used. It will burn everything down. It is time to burn it, I said. But the fallout? Do it, Arthur. Draft the motion and send a copy to Brandon. Just Brandon. Not his lawyer. Not his wife. Send it directly to his personal email. Prescott hesitated. You are a cold man, Thomas. I am a structural engineer, Arthur Rance replied. I fix problems, and sometimes to fix a building that is rotting from the inside, you have to condemn it. I ended the call. I sat back in the chair. The noise outside was getting louder. I could hear chanting. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The greedy father has got to go. It was catchy. I would give them that. I picked up my notebook. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote down a list of variables. Variable 1, Brandon's gambling debt. Variable 2, Tiffany's vanity. Variable 3, the durability of their marriage when the money runs out. I did the math. The equation didn't balance. The structure was unstable. All I had to do was pull one pin. I looked at my watch. It was 2 p.m. By 5 p.m., Brandon would receive the email. By 6 p.m., the alliance between him and Tiffany would begin to fracture. By tomorrow morning, the mob outside my window would be the least of their problems. I poured another cup of tea. I waited. Patience is a weapon. Most people don't know how to use it. They rush. They react. They explode. I just wait. I wait for the concrete to set. I wait for the steel to cool. And I wait for my enemies to walk into the trap I built for them, thinking it is a palace. The notification on my laptop screen blinked green. It was a read receipt. Brandon had opened the email. I leaned back in my chair in the hotel room, the city noise below me a distant hum. I could almost hear the shout of victory from across town. I could picture it perfectly. Brandon jumping up from the stained couch in his in-laws' house, spilling his drink, screaming that the old man had finally cracked. Tiffany probably grabbed her phone immediately to record a victory dance for her followers. They thought they had won. They thought the public shaming the lies and the pressure had broken me. They thought I was handing them the keys to the kingdom because I was too weak to fight. The email was simple. It was a formal notification from the trustee. In accordance with the beneficiary's urgent request for housing and pursuant to Clause B of the trust agreement, immediate occupancy of the primary residence at 55 Highland Drive is granted to Brandon Blackwood and his spouse. They didn't read the fine print. They never did. They saw the address. They saw the word granted. They didn't ask why Catherine had nicknamed that house the Gilded Cage. They didn't ask why I, a structural engineer, had refused to live there for the last 5 years of our marriage. They just saw a mansion worth $4.5 million, and they saw themselves inside it. The move happened less than 24 hours later. I didn't have to guess. I watched it happen. I had access to the security cameras. I sat in my hotel room drinking tea, watching the live feed on my monitor. It was like watching a reality show about people walking into a minefield. Brandon pulled up in a rented moving truck. Tiffany followed in her convertible. She stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a white fur vest, looking up at the house like she was the queen returning to her castle. The house was impressive from the outside. It was a sprawling Victorian estate with stone turrets and ivy climbing the walls. It looked like old money. It looked like power. They walked through the front doors. I switched camera views to the foyer. We did it? Tiffany screamed, her voice echoing in the empty hall. She spun around, filming herself. Look at this, guys. We are finally home. The haters tried to stop us, but love wins. Brandon was popping a bottle of champagne. To us, he shouted. To the good life. I took a sip of my tea. Enjoy it, I whispered. The temperature is dropping tonight. The first crack in their perfect world appeared 6 hours later. The sun went down and the chill of late autumn settled over the city. That house was built in 1902. It had single-pane windows and stone walls that held the cold like a tomb. On the camera feed, I saw Tiffany wrap her arms around herself. She said something to Brandon. He walked over to the thermostat on the wall and cranked it up. Nothing happened. He hit it again. He fiddled with the dial. I knew exactly what was happening. The boiler in the basement was original to the 1950s renovation. It was a temperamental beast that required a specific sequence of valves to be turned, pressure to be checked, and a pilot light that liked to dance in the draft. Catherine had kept a full-time maintenance man just to keep the thing running. I had fired him yesterday. By midnight, they were wearing coats inside the house. I watched them huddle under blankets on the antique sofas in the living room. The fireplace was right there, but they couldn't use it. The chimney hadn't been swept in 3 years, and if they lit a log, they would smoke themselves out in 5 minutes. My phone rang at 1 a.m. It was Brandon. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "Hello," I said, my voice groggy, pretending to be asleep. "Dad." "The heat is broken," Brandon shouted. "It is freezing in here. You need to call someone." I sat up in bed and turned on the lamp. "I don't need to do anything, Brandon," I said calmly. "Did you read the full text of Clause B? What I don't care about the text, I care that I can see my breath in the living room. Fix it." Clause B states that upon taking occupancy, the beneficiary assumes all responsibility for the maintenance, utilities, and upkeep of the property. I recited from memory. The trust provides the asset. You provide the care. "You are kidding me," he stammered. "I am not." "You wanted the house. You got the house. It is a historical landmark, Brandon. That means repairs must be done by certified specialists. You can't just call a handyman." "Dad, please. It is 40 degrees in here." "Then I suggest you put on a sweater," I said, "or pay for the repair." I believe the last quote for a full boiler replacement was $52,000. $52,000. Welcome to homeownership's son. I hung up and turned off the phone. The next morning, the reality of their victory began to set in. The daylight revealed what the night had hidden. The house wasn't just cold, it was decaying. Catherine had bought the place for the land value. She knew the structure was a money pit. She had planned to tear it down and build condos, but the Historical Society blocked her, so she let it sit. She did the bare minimum to keep it standing. I watched on the cameras as Tiffany tried to take a shower in the master bath. She turned the handle. Brown water sputtered out, coughing and spitting rust. The pipes were old iron. Without regular use, they corroded. She screamed. I saw her running out of the bathroom in a towel, her hair wet with rusty sludge. She was crying. Not the fake tears for the camera. Real tears of frustration. "This place is a dump," I heard her yell at Brandon. "You told me it was a mansion." "It is a mansion," Brandon yelled back. "It just needs a little work, a little work." "There is mold in the closet, Brandon. My shoes are going to get ruined." I ordered breakfast from room service and watched the show. It was better than anything on television. But the financial noose was the real trap. At noon, a courier arrived at the gate. He buzzed the intercom. Brandon went out to meet him. The courier handed him a thick envelope. It wasn't from me. It was from the county tax assessor. I had arranged for the mail to be forwarded to the residence now that it was occupied. Brandon opened the envelope standing in the driveway. I zoomed in with the camera. I saw his shoulders slump. Property taxes on a $4.5 million estate in this district were astronomical. And because the house was now occupied by a beneficiary and not being used for business purposes, the tax exemption status Catherine had used was void. He was holding a bill for $85,000, due in 30 days. He walked back into the house looking like he had been punched in the gut. He went into the kitchen where Tiffany was trying to boil water on the stove because the electric kettle wasn't working. "We have a problem," Brandon said, tossing the tax bill on the counter. Tiffany looked at it. Her eyes bugged out. "We don't have this kind of money, Brandon. We don't even have $5,000. "Then sell something," Brandon yelled. "Sell a painting. Sell the silver." "They can't," I whispered to the monitor. As if on cue, my lawyer Prescott sent an email to Brandon's phone. I had timed it perfectly. The email was a reminder of the inventory list. Every item in the house, from the paintings on the wall to the silver forks in the drawer, was cataloged property of the trust. Any removal or sale of these items would be considered theft and a violation of the trust agreement, resulting in immediate eviction and potential criminal charges. I saw Brandon check his phone. He read the email. He looked at the antique silver tea set on the counter. He picked up a heavy silver spoon and threw it across the room. It clattered against the stone floor. He was trapped. He was living in a museum he couldn't afford to visit, let alone live in. Later that afternoon, the real sharks started circling. I saw a black sedan pull up to the gate. 2 men in suits got out. They didn't look like lawyers. They looked like the kind of men who collected debts for the private lending group in Chicago. They buzzed the intercom. Brandon didn't answer. They buzzed again. Long, angry presses. I watched Brandon on the interior camera. He was hiding in the hallway, peeking out the window. He was terrified. He had told his creditors he was coming into money. He had told them he would have the $28 million. Now they knew he was in the house, but they probably also knew he didn't have the cash. The men stood there for 10 minutes. One of them took a picture of the gate. The other one made a phone call. They got back in the car and drove off slowly. They weren't leaving. They were just backing off to wait. Brandon collapsed onto the stairs. He put his head in his hands. Tiffany sat next to him. She wasn't comforting him. She was scrolling on her phone, probably deleting comments or blocking people who were asking why she hadn't posted a house tour yet. They were alone. They were cold. They were broke. And they were sitting inside a $4 million trap that was slowly suffocating them. I closed my laptop. I had to go to a meeting. I had an appointment with a very specific type of broker. Brandon was about to try something desperate. I knew my son. When he was cornered, he didn't get smarter. He got reckless. He was going to try to leverage the house. He was going to try to take out a loan against the property value, forging my signature, if he had to. I needed to be one step ahead. I needed to make sure that when he reached for a lifeline, he grabbed an anchor instead. I put on my coat. The hotel room was warm and quiet. I felt a moment of pity for them shivering in that drafty mausoleum. But then I remembered the eviction notice at the funeral. I remembered the live stream. I remembered the email calling me a narcissist. The pity evaporated. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like a retired engineer anymore. I looked like a man who was done building bridges. I walked out the door. Phase 2 was complete. The house was crushing them. Now it was time for Phase 3, the financial collapse. I took the elevator down to the lobby. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Brandon. "Dad, we need to talk. It is urgent." I didn't reply. Let him sweat, I thought. Let the cold seep in. Let him understand that the warmth he took for granted his entire life wasn't free. It was provided, and the provider had just walked off the job. I watched the surveillance feed from my hotel room. It was pitiful. Brandon was pacing the length of the freezing library wrapped in 3 layers of cashmere. He looked like a prince who had lost his kingdom and was trying to govern a pile of rubble. The house was cold. The water was brown. The silence was heavy. He picked up his phone. I knew who he was calling. I had access to his call logs through the family plan he had never bothered to separate from my account. He was dialing a number listed in his contacts simply as the guy. This was the mistake I had been waiting for. I listened to the call. "I need cash," Brandon whispered into the phone. "No, not for the big debt. I need walking around money. I need 50,000, just to keep the lights on, just to fix the heat." He paused. He listened. "I have collateral," Brandon lied. "I have the house. It is worth $4 million. I can sign a lien." He was offering property he did not own. He was committing fraud. Again. I hung up the monitor and picked up my own phone. I dialed the number for the private lending group in Chicago. The ones who had threatened me. The ones who held the $800,000 note on my son's gambling addiction. "Mr. Blackwood." The gravelly voice answered. "I am ready to deal," I said. I met them an hour later in the back of a steakhouse downtown. It was a cliché, but criminals love tradition. There were two of them. They wore expensive suits that didn't quite fit. They looked at me like I was a desperate father trying to save his boy. They were wrong. I was a businessman acquiring an asset. I placed a cashier's check on the table. It was for $600,000. "The debt is $800," the man said, "plus interest. That brings it to $1 million. "The debt is bad," I said calmly. "You know it. I know it. Brandon doesn't have the money. The trust is locked tight. If you kill him, you get $0. If you sue him, you get in line behind 50 other creditors." I pushed the check forward. $600,000. Cash. Today. Take it and transfer the note to my holding company or walk away with nothing. The man looked at the check. He looked at his partner. Greed warred with pride. Greed won. Greed always wins. He took the check. He signed the transfer paper I had prepared. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Blackwood." He sneered. "Your son is a loser. You are wasting your money." "I am not wasting it," I said. "I am investing in his education." I walked out of the steakhouse with the paper in my pocket. I now owned Brandon's biggest nightmare. The Chicago mob wouldn't break his legs anymore, but I had the power to break his spirit. I returned to the hotel and opened my laptop. Brandon had found a local lender for his $50,000 request, a predatory loan shark who operated out of a pawn shop on 4th Street. I saw the email confirmation pop up on Brandon's screen via my remote access. He had agreed to an interest rate of 40%. He had signed a document pledging the mansion's contents as collateral. He was selling Catherine's legacy to buy heating oil and takeout food. I called the pawn shop owner. I didn't use my name. I used the name of my shell company, Ironwood Financial. "I understand you just issued a high-risk loan to a Mr. Brandon Blackwood," I said. "Who is this?" the pawnbroker asked. "I am the primary lien holder on his assets." I lied smoothly. "Your loan is subordinate to mine. If he defaults, and he will default, I will seize everything before you see a dime. However, I am willing to buy your position right now. Full value, plus 5% for your trouble." The pawnbroker didn't hesitate. He knew a bad bet when he saw one. He took the deal. By 5 p.m. that afternoon, I was the sole creditor for every single debt my son had. The gambling debt, the new emergency loan, even the credit card debt Tiffany had racked up. I had bought it all through Ironwood Financial. I sat back in my chair. I felt a strange mixture of power and sadness. I owned my son. He didn't know it yet. He thought he had pulled a fast one. I switched the camera view back to the mansion. The mood had changed. The heat was on. The radiators were clanking and hissing, pumping warmth into the frozen rooms. Brandon was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by bags of expensive takeout food. Sushi, lobster rolls, champagne. He had borrowed $50,000 to fix the boiler, and he was blowing the rest on a party for two. Tiffany was laughing. She was recording a video. "We are survivors," she shouted to her phone. "We hit a rough patch, but we are back on top. The haters can't keep us down. They were toasting with my money. They were celebrating with debt they could never repay." I picked up my phone and typed a text message to Brandon. I sent it from an anonymous number associated with Ironwood Financial. "Mr. Blackwood," the text read, "this is a notification that your debts have been consolidated and acquired by Ironwood Financial. Your first payment of $15,000 is due in 48 hours. Failure to pay will result in immediate asset seizure." I watched the screen. Brandon's phone buzzed. He picked it up. He read the message. He dropped the lobster roll. He showed the phone to Tiffany. She stopped laughing. She looked at the camera, realized she was still recording, and ended the stream abruptly. "Who is Ironwood Financial?" I heard Tiffany ask. "I don't know," Brandon stammered. "I don't know, but they bought the Chicago debt. And the pawn shop debt. They bought everything. $15,000 in 2 days," Tiffany shrieked. "We just spent $3,000 on dinner and wine." I watched them panic. They started running around the room looking for things to sell. They grabbed silver candlesticks. They grabbed a small painting. But they couldn't leave the house. The police had warned them. If they were caught moving assets, they would be arrested. They were trapped in a warm house with full bellies, and they were more terrified than they had been when they were freezing. Because now the enemy wasn't the cold. It wasn't the dark. It was a faceless corporation that demanded payment. I closed my laptop. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. I had to prepare the foreclosure papers. I wasn't going to foreclose on the house. The trust owned the house. I was going to foreclose on them. I was going to garnish his wages if he ever got a job. I was going to seize his bank accounts. I was going to make sure that every dollar he touched for the rest of his life went to paying back the debt he had accrued. He wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to live the high life on credit. Well, the bill had arrived, and the collector was his father. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. "Catherine," I whispered into the darkness, "I hope you can forgive me for what I am about to do," but I knew she would. She built skyscrapers. She knew that sometimes before you can build something new, you have to demolish what is standing there all the way down to the ground. Brandon was about to learn that rock bottom wasn't just a phrase. It was a destination. And he had just arrived. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my hotel suite. I sat in the dark sipping a glass of water, watching the final act of my son's morality play unfold on the surveillance monitor. The audio from the mansion was crisp. I could hear the wind rattling the old window panes and the frantic tapping of Tiffany's fingernails on the marble countertop. They were desperate. The notification from Ironwood Financial demanding the first payment had pushed them over the edge. They weren't looking for money anymore. They were looking for a way to erase the board. They needed the trustee gone. I watched Brandon pace the library floor. He looked haggard. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. "We have no choice," Tiffany whispered. She was huddled in a blanket, her face pale. "He is going to ruin us, Brandon. He bought the debt. He controls the house. He is going to make us homeless. We have to pull the trigger on the medical option." I leaned forward. This was it. The moment they stopped being greedy children and became criminals. Brandon stopped pacing. He looked at his wife. "Aris wants 50,000 cash," Brandon said. "We gave him the last of the credit card advances. If this doesn't work, we are dead." "It will work," Tiffany insisted. "He drafted the file yesterday. Acute paranoia. Dementia with violent tendencies. He backdated the records to show a 6-month decline. Once the police see the file, they won't even ask questions. They will just take him. And once he is in the facility," Brandon added, his voice gaining strength, "Aris keeps him sedated. We petitioned the court for emergency guardianship. We get control of the trust. We pay off Ironwood. It was a solid plan. Evil, cruel, and highly illegal, but solid. If I were just a retired old man with no resources, it would have worked. I would have woken up in a padded room with no memory of how I got there. But I wasn't just an old man. I was the man who was listening. I picked up my phone and sent a text message to a number I had saved only as medic. "It is happening tonight," I typed. "Be ready." Then I waited. 2 hours later, the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a pounding. The kind of knock that demands entry. I stood up and smoothed my jacket. I checked the mirror. I made sure I looked calm, rational. I opened the door. The hallway was crowded. Brandon stood in the front. He was putting on the performance of his life. He had tears in his eyes. He was wringing his hands. "Dad, please," he sobbed. "Open the door. We just want to help you." Behind him stood Dr. Aris. I recognized him from the photos Prescott had shown me. He was a short, sweaty man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard like it was a shield. And behind them were 2 uniformed police officers and 2 paramedics with a gurney. "Mr. Blackwood," one of the officers said, stepping forward, "we have received a report that you are a danger to yourself and others. We have a court order for an emergency psychiatric evaluation." I looked at the officer. He was young. He was just doing his job based on the lies he had been fed. "Officer," I said calmly, "I am sitting in my hotel room drinking tea. Does that look dangerous to you?" "He is hiding a weapon," Tiffany screamed from the back of the group. She pushed her way forward. "He told us he has a gun. He said he was going to shoot us, and then himself, he is hearing voices." It was a lie so bold it was almost impressive. Dr. Aris stepped up. He waved the clipboard. "Officer, I am Dr. Aris, the family physician. Mr. Blackwood has a documented history of paranoid schizophrenia and early-onset dementia. He has been off his medication for weeks. He is in a state of acute psychosis. If we don't sedate him now, he could snap." I looked at Aris. "I have never met you in my life," I said. "See," Aris said to the officer, shaking his head sadly. "He doesn't recognize me. He has forgotten the last 5 years. It is the dementia. It is progressing faster than we thought." Brandon stepped into the room. He tried to hug me. I stepped back. "Dad." "Please," Brandon cried. "Just go with the doctor. They will take care of you. I can't watch you suffer like this. You are seeing things that aren't there." I looked at my son. I looked deep into his eyes. I was looking for a shred of hesitation. A flicker of guilt. There was nothing. Just cold, hard calculation. He was willing to lock me away in a chemical prison for the rest of my life so he could buy a yacht. I realized then that the son I loved was gone. He had died a long time ago, replaced by this hollow creature. I looked at the officer. "I will come with you," I said. "I don't want a scene." "He is resisting," Tiffany yelled. "He has a knife in his pocket. Grab him." The officers tensed. One of them put his hand on his holster. "Ma'am, step back," the officer ordered. I slowly raised my hands. "I am unarmed," I said. "You can search me." The officer patted me down. He found my wallet, my phone, and a small notebook. No gun. No knife. "He is hallucinating," Dr. Aris said quickly. "He probably thinks he is holding a knife. We need to restrain him, for his own safety." The officer looked doubtful, but he had a doctor's order. He nodded to the paramedics. "Restrain him," the officer said. The paramedics moved in. One of them was tall, broad-shouldered, with a mask covering half his face. He grabbed my arm. His grip was firm but not painful. I looked at his name tag. It said Davis. This was my man. Davis pushed me down onto the gurney. He clicked the leather straps around my wrists. He did it with a practiced efficiency. I am sorry, Mr. Blackwood Davis said, his voice muffled by the mask. This is for the best. He clicked the straps around my ankles. Brandon let out a sigh of relief that sounded like a tire deflating. He wiped his fake tears. Thank you, officer, Brandon said. Thank you. You saved him. I lay on the gurney, staring up at the ceiling. You have made a mistake, Brandon, I said quietly. He leaned over me. His face was inches from mine. He smelled of fear and mints. Don't worry, Dad, he whispered so only I could hear. You won't remember any of this in the morning. The drugs Aris is going to give you, they are very strong. Goodbye, Dad. He stood up and nodded to the paramedics. Take him away. They wheeled me out. We went down the service elevator. The lobby was full of people watching the spectacle. The crazy millionaire being hauled off to the loony bin. They loaded me into the back of the ambulance. Dr. Aris climbed in the front. Davis and the other medic climbed in the back with me. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed. The vehicle lurched forward. We drove for 2 blocks. Then the siren turned off. Davis stood up. He pulled down the window shade so no one could see inside. He pulled off his mask. He smiled. That was a close one, boss, Davis said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He unlocked the cuffs on my wrists, then my ankles. I sat up and rubbed my wrists. Did you get it? I asked. Davis pointed to the small camera pinned to his uniform shirt. Audio and video high definition, Davis said. I got Aris claiming he treated you for 5 years. I got Tiffany lying about the gun. And I got your son whispering that he was going to wipe your memory. It is all in the cloud, Mr. Blackwood. I looked at the front of the ambulance where Dr. Aris was sitting with the driver. Does the driver know? I asked. The driver is my cousin, Davis said. And Aris thinks we are taking you to his private clinic in the county. He is counting his $50,000 right now. Where are we really going? I asked. We are going to the safe house, Davis said. Prescott is waiting there. He has a notary and a judge on standby. We are going to process this evidence tonight. I looked out the small window in the back door. The city lights were fading. What about Aris? I asked. Davis grinned. He reached for a medical bag. He pulled out a syringe. The driver is going to pull over in 5 minutes for a mechanical check, Davis said. We are going to offer the good doctor a bottle of water. He looks thirsty. When he wakes up, he is going to be in a police precinct with a confession already typed out for him to sign. I nodded. It was ruthless. It was necessary. We stopped in an alleyway. The back doors opened. I stepped out of the ambulance a free man. Aris was in the front seat, slumped against the window, fast asleep. I walked over to him. I took the clipboard from his lap. I looked at the fake medical file he had created. It was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of fraud. I kept the clipboard. It was evidence. Take him to the precinct, I told Davis. I watched the ambulance drive away. I stood alone in the alley. I took a deep breath. My son thought I was strapped to a bed, drooling on my way to a chemical lobotomy. He thought the board was cleared. He thought he had won. He was about to start celebrating. He would start spending money he didn't have. He would start selling assets he didn't own. He would get careless. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I dialed Prescott. Phase 3 is complete, I said. I am underground. Excellent, Prescott said. Brandon just posted a status update. Heartbroken but relieved. Dad is finally getting the help he needs. He is celebrating, I said. He is, Prescott confirmed. He just scheduled an auction. He is selling the estate's antique collection. Tomorrow night. At the mansion. An auction, I repeated. Illegal, unauthorized, and completely public. Perfect, I said. I looked at the city skyline. Let him sell it, I said. Let him gather the buyers, Let him stand on the podium and think he is the king of the world. I will be there, Prescott. Yes, Thomas, get me a mask. I am going to buy some antiques. I hung up. I wasn't just going to stop him. I was going to let him construct his own public execution, and I was going to be the one to pull the lever. The game wasn't over. The trap had just snapped shut, and my son was the one inside the cage. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of the black sedan I had hired for the evening. From the back seat, I watched the procession of luxury cars snake their way up to the mansion. Bentleys, Ferraris, a few vintage Rolls-Royces. My son had certainly managed to attract the vultures. They were the kind of people who smelled blood in the water and came swimming with open wallets, eager to pick the carcass of a dying estate clean before the legal authorities could intervene. I adjusted the silk mask on my face. It was a masquerade theme, a pretentious touch added by Tiffany to make the illegal liquidation of my ex-wife's assets feel like a high society gala. It played perfectly into my hands. To them, I was just another anonymous bidder, a faceless wallet in a tuxedo. To me, I was the executioner arriving for the final act. I stepped out of the car. The night air was crisp. The mansion was lit up like a Christmas tree, every window blazing music spilling out onto the lawn. It looked alive. It looked festive. But I knew the foundation was rotting. I walked up the steps, flashing a digital invitation on my phone that Prescott had fabricated for me. The security guard, a private contractor who didn't know my face, waved me through. Inside the house I had once shared with Catherine had been transformed into a marketplace. The furniture was pushed against the walls. Display cases had been erected in the center of the ballroom. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, stepping over the ghosts of my memories. I saw Brandon immediately. He stood on a raised platform at the far end of the room, holding a microphone. He looked manic. His eyes were bright, too bright, and his movements were jerky. He was wearing a tuxedo that I recognized. It was mine. A custom piece I had left in the closet 5 years ago. It was tight across his chest, straining at the buttons. He was literally trying to fill his father's shoes and failing. Tiffany was working the crowd, her laugh shrill and artificial. She was draped in Catherine's jewelry, a diamond choker, sapphire earrings, items that were specifically listed in the trust as non-liquid assets meant for preservation. She was wearing evidence. I took a glass of water from a passing tray and moved to the edge of the room, blending into the shadows. I needed to wait. I needed him to commit the crime fully. Intent wasn't enough. I needed the transaction. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon's voice boomed over the speakers. Welcome to the estate sale of the century. Tonight we are offering items that have never before been seen by the public. Treasures collected over a lifetime of empire building. And remember, tonight is cash and carry. No paper trails, just pure acquisition. A ripple of excited laughter went through the crowd. They knew it was illicit. That was part of the allure. They were buying stolen goods, and they didn't care. The auction began. It was a frenzy. A set of Ming vases went for $40,000. A Persian rug hand-woven in the 19th century went for $60,000. Brandon was practically vibrating. He was doing the math in his head, calculating how many debts he could pay off, how much he could keep. He thought he was free. He thought his father was strapped to a bed in a padded room, drooling on a pillow, while he sold off the family legacy. I waited until the centerpiece was unveiled. 2 men struggled to bring a large covered canvas onto the stage. Brandon ripped off the velvet cloth with a flourish. The crowd gasped. It was The Solitude, a painting Catherine had bought in Vienna 30 years ago. It wasn't just art. It was a piece of history, and more importantly, it was the single item Catherine had explicitly designated in her will to be donated to the National Gallery. It was classified as a protected cultural asset. Selling it to a private buyer wasn't just theft. It was a federal crime involving the trafficking of protected cultural property. Bidding starts at $500,000. Brandon announced, his voice trembling with greed. 500, a voice shouted from the front. 600, another yelled. I stepped forward. I raised my hand. 1 million, I said. The room went silent. Heads turned. The number hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Brandon squinted into the lights, trying to see who had spoken. $1 million, Brandon repeated, his voice cracking. Do I hear 1.1? No one spoke. $1 million was a steep price for a stolen painting, even for this crowd. Going once, Brandon said, sweating now. Going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the black mask for $1 million. The gavel came down. The crack echoed like a gunshot. The crime was complete. He had accepted the bid. He had agreed to the sale. I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me. I moved with the steady, heavy gait of a man who knows exactly where he is going. Sir, please come up to settle the payment, Brandon said, grinning. He extended a hand. He was shaking. He was envisioning his freedom. I climbed the steps. I stood toe to toe with my son. I will settle the payment, Brandon, I said. He froze. The smile died on his lips. His eyes went wide. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had told him bedtime stories. The voice that had taught him to ride a bike. The voice he had tried to silence with a fake medical diagnosis. Dad, he whispered. I reached up and untied the silk mask. I let it fall to the floor. A collective gasp went through the room. Some of the guests recognized me. The whispers started immediately. Isn't he supposed to be in a home? I thought he was crazy. I am not crazy, Brandon, I said. My voice amplified by the microphone he was still holding. But I am very, very disappointed. You were taken away. Brandon stammered, backing up until he hit the easel, holding the painting. Dr. Aris said. Dr. Aris is currently in federal custody, I said calmly, and in about 30 seconds you will be joining him. Brandon looked around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. He looked at Tiffany. She had frozen near the champagne tower, her face pale as the pearls around her neck. You can't do this, Brandon hissed. This is my house. These are my things. I pulled a document from my inside pocket. This is the inventory list of the Catherine Blackwood Protective Trust, I said, holding it up for the room to see. Every item sold tonight is listed here, and this painting is designated as a National Heritage Asset. Selling it privately is a violation of the National Stolen Property Act. I turned to the crowd. To anyone who purchased an item tonight, I suggest you leave it where it is. Possession of stolen goods is a felony. If you walk out that door with so much as a silver spoon, you will be prosecuted. The panic was instant. The vultures didn't want to fight. They wanted easy prey. They dropped vases. They abandoned rugs. They scrambled for the exits, pushing and shoving to get away from the crime scene. Brandon grabbed my arm. Dad. Stop, he screamed. You are ruining me. I need this money. They are going to kill me. I looked at his hand on my arm. Let go, I said. He didn't let go. He tightened his grip. His eyes were wild. He reached into his pocket. I didn't know if he had a weapon. I didn't care. Suddenly, the stained glass windows at the front of the hall shattered inward. Flashbangs detonated in the foyer. The sound was deafening. Smoke filled the air. FBI. Down on the ground, Prescott hadn't just called the local police. He had called the federal task force dealing with art theft and fraud. The investigation into Dr. Aris and the document forger had led them straight here. Agents in tactical gear swarmed the room. Brandon screamed. He tried to run. He made it 3 steps before an agent tackled him. I watched my son hit the floor. I watched them zip-tie his hands behind his back. I watched him thrash and wail like a child having a tantrum, his face pressed against the parquet floor I had installed 20 years ago. Tiffany tried to blend in with the fleeing guests. She tried to slip out the side door, but an agent was waiting. "Mrs. Blackwood," the agent said, "we have a warrant for your arrest regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and identity theft." They handcuffed her. The diamonds she was wearing sparkled under the tactical lights. I stood alone on the stage next to the painting. The room cleared out until it was just the agents, the suspects, and me. An agent approached me. "Mr. Blackwood," he asked. "I am Thomas Blackwood," I said. "I am the trustee. We secured the perimeter. The suspects are in custody. We will need a statement." I looked at Brandon. They were hauling him up. He was weeping. Snot ran down his face. He looked at me. "Dad, help me tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I didn't know I walked down the steps." I walked over to him. I leaned in close. "I can't help you, Brandon," I said softly. "The trustee has denied your request." "You are a monster," he screamed as they dragged him out the door. "You planned this. You set me up." "I didn't set you up, son," I said to his retreating back. "I just let you be yourself." The heavy oak doors slammed shut. Silence returned to the mansion. I looked around at the chaos. The overturned chairs, the spilled champagne, the debris of a life built on greed. Prescott walked in from the side entrance, flanked by 2 more agents. "It is done," Prescott said. "Is it?" I asked. He nodded. "They are facing 20 years, minimum. The federal charges for the art theft stick hard, plus the fraud, plus the attempted kidnapping regarding your medical committal. They aren't getting out anytime soon." I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. It wasn't triumph. It was just a heavy gray fatigue. "I need a drink, Arthur," I said. I walked to the bar in the corner. I found the bottle of whiskey Brandon had been drinking. It was an 18-year-old single malt. I poured 2 glasses. I handed one to Prescott. "To Catherine," I said. Prescott clinked his glass against mine. "To Catherine, sir." I drank. The burn felt good. It felt real. But as the warmth spread through my chest, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. From Tiffany. She must have managed to send it right before they took her phone. I looked at the screen. "You think you won," she wrote, "but you don't know everything. Check the safe in the master bedroom. Brandon didn't just sell the art. He sold the one thing you actually care about." I stared at the words. The safe. Catherine kept her personal journals in there. The letters we wrote to each other when we were young. The things that had no monetary value but were worth more to me than the entire estate. I ran up the stairs. I didn't feel like an old man anymore. I felt a cold panic. I burst into the master bedroom. The safe was open. It was empty. They had sold my memories. I collapsed onto the bed. I had won the war. I had destroyed my enemies. But as I looked at the empty steel box, I realized that in a war between father and son, there are no winners. There are only survivors. And I had survived. But the cost was rising. The silence that followed the raid on the mansion didn't last long. I knew it wouldn't. Federal charges are heavy, but the legal system is a slow beast, and bail bondsmen are always hungry for business. 3 days after I watched my son and his wife being dragged away in handcuffs, they were back on the street. They had surrendered their passports. They were wearing ankle monitors, but they were free. For now. I sat in my hotel room staring at the phone. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for the inevitable collapse. Pressure does strange things to structures that aren't built to code. It finds the cracks. It widens them. And the marriage between Brandon and Tiffany was nothing but hairline fractures held together by greed and hairspray. My phone rang on Tuesday evening. It wasn't Brandon. It was Tiffany. I answered on the first ring. I didn't say hello, I just listened. "Tom," she whispered, Her voice was shaking. It lacked the theatrical performance quality she usually projected for her followers. This sounded like raw, unfiltered fear. "Tom, I need to see you. Alone. Please, don't tell Brandon." I looked at the recording device I had already set up next to the phone. "Why would I meet with you, Tiffany?" I asked. "You just tried to sell my family heritage to the highest bidder." "Because I can give you Brandon," she said. The words hung in the air. Cold, sharp, precise. I named a place. A small diner on the edge of town, far away from the country clubs and the prying eyes of her social circle. A place where truck drivers ate meatloaf at the counter, and nobody cared who you were or what you were wearing. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth near the back. I ordered a black coffee. Tiffany walked in wearing a hoodie and jeans. She looked small. She looked ordinary. The diamonds were gone, seized as evidence. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified woman who realized she was about to go to prison for a very long time. She slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't order anything. She just wrapped her hands around a glass of water, as if it were a lifeline. "He is crazy, Tom," she started, her eyes darting around the room. "Brandon is out of his mind. He is blaming me for everything. He told his lawyer that I masterminded the auction. He is trying to set me up." I took a sip of coffee. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. In my years negotiating contracts with steel unions, I learned that if you stay quiet long enough, the other person will fill the void with the truth. "I didn't know about the forgery," she said, the words tumbling out now. "I didn't know he signed your name on the loan documents. I thought he had permission. I thought he was handling the trust legitimately. I was just a wife supporting her husband." It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. I had the recordings of her planning the mental capacity hearing. I knew she was the architect of half their schemes. But I nodded slowly. "Go on," I said. "I can testify," she whispered, leaning across the greasy table. "I can tell the feds everything. I know where he hid the cash from the first few sales. I know about the offshore accounts he tried to open. I can give them a roadmap to bury him." "And what do you want in return, Tiffany?" I asked. "I want out," she said. "I want you to talk to the prosecutor. Tell them I cooperated. Help me get a plea deal. And—" She hesitated. The greed was still there, lurking behind the fear like a cockroach in the walls. "And I need money," she said. "Just enough to start over. 50,000. That is nothing to you now. You have millions. Give me 50,000 and I will hand you your son on a silver platter." I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had sworn to love and cherish my son. This woman who had lived in my house, eaten at my table, and called me dad when she wanted a new car. She was selling her husband for the price of a mid-range sedan. "You are offering to destroy Brandon to save yourself," I clarified. "You are offering to send the man you married to federal prison so you can avoid consequences." "He is going to prison anyway," she snapped, her voice rising. "Why should I go down with him? He is a loser, Tom. You know he is. He never earned a dime in his life. He gambled away our future. He dragged me into this mess. I am a victim here." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table, screen down. "Is that your final offer?" I asked. "You trade Brandon for 50,000 and a good word with the DA." "Yes," she said. "Yes. Just give me the money." I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording app. "I didn't bring any money, Tiffany," I said. Her face fell. "What you said?" I didn't say anything, I corrected her. I just listened. And I think I have heard enough. I stood up. I threw a $5 bill on the table for the coffee. "You are a witness, Tom," she hissed, grabbing my sleeve. "You heard me? We had a deal." "We didn't have a deal," I said, pulling my arm away. "We had a conversation. And now I am going to share that conversation with the only other person who needs to hear it. I walked out of the diner. The night air felt clean compared to the atmosphere inside that booth. I sat in my car. I opened the audio file. I edited it quickly, cutting out the dead air, leaving only her voice, her betrayal, her price tag. I saved the file. I opened my messages. I found Brandon's contact. He was currently staying at a cheap motel near the airport, forbidden from returning to the mansion by the court order. He was probably sitting there right now, terrified, waiting for his wife to come back with a solution. I attached the file. I typed a short message. She values you at $50,000, son. I thought you should know. I hit send. I watched the progress bar. Sending, sent, delivered. I started the engine. I didn't drive away immediately. I waited. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Tiffany. I declined the call. Then a text came in from Brandon. It was just a string of incoherent curses. Then a second text. She is dead to me. I put the phone down. The alliance was broken. The two people who had conspired to destroy my life were now at war with each other. They wouldn't be plotting against me anymore. They would be too busy trying to rip each other's throats out. I drove back to the hotel. I felt a heavy stone in my gut. It wasn't guilt. It was the finality of it. I had just severed the last tie between them. I had ensured that when they went to trial, they would have separate defense attorneys. They would have conflicting stories. They would destroy each other's credibility on the stand. It was the most effective legal strategy money could buy, and it only cost me a cup of coffee. But as I drove through the city streets, I couldn't help but remember the day they got married. I remembered the way Brandon looked at her when she walked down the aisle. He had looked so happy, so sure. He didn't know he was marrying a mercenary, and I didn't know I was raising a fool. I parked the car. I walked up to my room. There was one more thing I had to do. I called Prescott. Arthur, I said. I just sent you an audio file. I received it, Prescott said. It is brutal, Thomas. It is necessary, I said. Send it to the district attorney. Tell them Ms. Dawson approached me to solicit a bribe in exchange for testimony. It goes to her character. It kills any plea deal she might try to cut later. You are making sure she goes to prison too, Prescott said. She was the one who suggested the mental facility, Arthur, I reminded him. She was the one who wanted to lock me away. I am just returning the favor. Understood, Prescott said. I will file it in the morning. I hung up. I poured a glass of water. My hands were steady. The house of cards had fallen. Now I just had to sweep up the debris. But I knew my son. I knew Brandon. He was weak, yes, but he was also volatile. He had just lost his fortune. He had lost his freedom. And now he had lost his wife's loyalty. He had nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. I went to the door of my hotel room. I checked the deadbolt. I engaged the safety latch. I pushed a heavy chair in front of the door. It was an old instinct, a survival habit. I had a feeling I was going to need it. Brandon wasn't going to go quietly. He was going to explode. And I was ground zero. I sat in the leather chair of Arthur Prescott's office on the 42nd floor. The city looked small from up here. It looked manageable. I wished my life felt the same. Prescott was pacing. He held a tablet in his hand. His face was pale. Thomas, have you seen the news? He asked. I shook my head. I didn't want to see the news. I wanted to sign the final affidavits and go to sleep for a week. Brandon went back to the motel, Prescott said. He put Tiffany in the hospital. I froze. My hand hovered over the pen. Is she alive? I asked. She is in critical condition, Prescott said. Broken jaw, fractured ribs. He beat her, Thomas. He beat her half to death, and then he ran. The police have an APB out on him. He is armed and dangerous. I put the pen down. He isn't running, I said. Prescott looked at me. What? He isn't running, I repeated. He has nowhere to go. He has no money. He has no passport. He has no friends. Then where is he? He is coming here, I said. How do you know? Because he thinks I am the source of his pain, I said. He thinks if he cuts off the head of the snake, the body will stop thrashing. He is coming to finish it.